Welcome to the IPMA Who Am I interviews. And we are so happy that you all could join us and listen to this interview. And we are talking tonight to Gremnir from all the way from the west coast of the USA. How are you doing this afternoon?
I am doing just dandy, thank you very much. Very happy to be sitting here and having a nice conversation with a kindred spirit.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right to it because, our listeners don't want to hear me, they want to hear all about you. So, tell us a little bit about how you got into music.
Well, I was kind of thrust into music against my will when I was about 8 years old in grade school, and there was a kind of beginning orchestra class where basically the kids were told you can play either viola or violin. So I was like, hey, I don't know what a viola is. Let's take violin. Um, so started taking that for a little while. Absolutely hated it, and the strings were so thin, especially on the E string for the violins. Like I've had baby fingers for like most of my life, so I would be playing on the E string as we are playing scales or whatever, and sliding around on the fingerboard, and my fingers would literally split open and start bleeding. So I didn't like that very much. That said, I continued playing violin for about 3 years, self-taught, until I was on the cusp of eighth grade, and then I heard these two classmates of mine play this really badass Vivaldi cello double cello concerto. It sounds like rock and roll. All three movements. I just say the second movement is very beautiful. A little slice of heaven. I love playing that one. And a couple of my students now are playing that piece too, or that collection of that whole concerto anyway. So starting that summer, I started playing cello, and I've been playing cello ever since. Yeah, a crash course into my history. That's how it started anyway. And then I pursued music at the college level, completed a bachelor's and master's degrees in it. And for my master's thesis, I wrote a symphony and got it performed. So
Oh,
that's
that's
how we
really
do.
awesome. That's actually awesome. Tell us a little bit about becoming a pagan musician then.
Right. So one of the classes that I remember taking as a graduate student was the music of medieval Spain, which used to be kind of an intellectual hub. Like people from all over the globe would go and meet there, of different spiritualities, and bring all kinds of, like, they would perform together, discuss philosophy together, religion, spirituality, all that good stuff. And we listened to a few different musical groups. I don't like to call them bands, because what they were striving for was kind of a reconstruction of authentic medieval music. Jordi Savall is one such artist that makes, I can't remember the name of his ensemble, but I would imagine it's the Jordi Savall ensemble. Um, anyway, we started listening to these guys, and also some traditional music from there that came from the Sephardic Jews, for example, that have gone over a pretty big transformation since then. Then Catholicism took over, and the church started controlling all the music in that way, or I should say, a great chunk of the music, the non-secular music. So after hearing about this, I was like, where can I find more music like this? Is there stuff like that that's been like recorded by this guy? So I started with Saval again, started trying to find more people. Was a little successful, and then I was more or less kind of unfulfilled because it didn't really scratch that itch, so to speak. You know what I mean? So I started listening to, what was it? Oh, my favorite living singer, Ivor Paul's daughter. She One of her songs, Mirska Flokar, actually stumbled onto my suggested for you, like YouTube suggestions or whatever. So I listened to it, and I was like, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it sounded, I could tell that she had undergone some kind of training, or was very well versed, very musically talented, right? So I listened to this, and it's like listening to the first light of sunshine first thing in the morning. I swear that song was just like
Mm.
pulling at my heartstrings, and I was just like, you get goosebumps listening to music like that, right? So I listened to that one, and I think I had left that video alone for a little while, but then maybe a couple weeks later, I saw just like another suggested video. Ivor is now singing with Bear McCreary and the orchestra for God of War 2018. And I was like, well, I like Bear McCreary's work, so I listened to it, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And
Ah.
yeah, so then this kind of set me on a bit of a slippery slope, because that summer I went to one of the things I do over the summer, I should say until last year, was teach at a summer music camp over here in California. It takes place in the Santa Cruz Mountains. It's gorgeous.
Awesome.
Kind of closed off from the rest of the world, and basically the only things that the students are doing is playing music and preparing for a set of concerts that happen over the course of a week. It's an overnight camp. Um, and one of my friends there told me, hey, you'd ought to listen to Vardruna. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll check him out. Again, mind blown as soon as I sat down and listened to that first record, right? So then I start listening to the rest of it. And then a year or so later, I see that Ivor is then touring with Vardruna in San Francisco, and Blimp is one of their stops. I was just like, I don't know when the next opportunity for this is going to be here, so I have to set aside time for this. And in that time, came across bands like Heilung, Forndam, Fawn, a bunch of others that are kind of in this very niche branch of music. And while I'm looking to this music, I'm also revisiting my studies of Norse mythology. And after finding out that I have a little bit of Scandinavian in me, mostly Scottish, Irish, a British Islander, but also about, I want to say 12% to 12 to 15% Puerto Rican, I just started going onto this like musical heritage dive, so to speak. And because I mean, Celtic music was always very fun to listen to for me, and also even more fun to play. Just I've had a couple of performances like that in the past, where just playing some Irish jigs, dances, and folk tunes and stuff like that. And then, like after learning about these, especially Norse paganism, for I want to say 4 years, I decided to just be like, you know what? I want to try and connect with this a little bit more. So it's like it's a part of my identity. So I want to try and bring that into my life a little bit more and adopt it as a spirituality, primarily as a means of connecting with my heritage, but also like educating myself on the kinds of values and traditions that were passed down from the Norse, and how that has been more or less watered down to an extent, and dare I say corrupted by Christianity, and how the effects that had on the myths and legends. So, but yeah, I would say it's a first. It started with the music, revisiting Norse mythology as a study, and then also finding out more about my own heritage and kind of personalizing that a little bit more. So,
Awesome, awesome. I appreciate that your candidness in that. That was a pretty amazing journey. So, what would you say is the best thing about being for all intents and purposes, I guess now a pagan musician?
well, I would say it's a handful of things that I love about it, because one, it's like there's that very kind of niche, or not niche, or cliche phrase of like make the things that you want to see more of in the world. And a lot of the music that I mentioned earlier has a very kind of like meditative, entrancing, dare I say, like mystical effect on myself as a listener. And one of the things that grad school kind of ruined for me was music, because like after studying it for so long and learning about Western music history at the very least, it's like music is a puzzle now, kind of figuring out the different layers. How many vocal layers are there? What are those instruments? I've never heard those before. Let me look them up once I find out. And percussions, like drums have been around for thousands of years. And then you have Tuvan and Mongolian throat singing, and different kinds of throat singing from other indigenous groups around the world. Uh, so it at first can be a little kind of overwhelming as far as like sounds that you're not really used to hearing. But then once you have a taste of it, it's like, ooh, I need more of this. I want to try and figure this stuff out, right? So, not exactly recreating the past because the past is gone. Like we're taking the past to learn from and kind of make new things with it, um, and lending itself to that almost dark storytelling in a certain way. But it could also be an uplifting story, depending on like it doesn't need the lyrics don't really even need to be understood to be felt that there's some kind of light blossoming from the music, right? Um, So, I mean, a lot of the times when I listen to Vardruna's music, for example, I don't really understand what's being said unless I look into the lyric books or somewhere online, just kind of figure it out and be like, oh, okay, he's singing about this. Oh, this whole Runelio trilogy for the first like three albums Vardruna put out is all about like Einar's relationships to like the younger and elder Futhark. Oh, you can make music about this. Fascinating. um, but also, people are writing music about the gods, and so it's their own relationship to the gods too, because that's the great thing about paganism is that it's very personal,
Hmm.
open-ended in a weird way, as long as we're being kind and compassionate to each other, right?
Right.
So I hope that answers your question.
It certainly does. No, it's really awesome, and I love it when this happens. That we kind of get even deeper into some of the things than just the questions that we ask. It gives us a real insight into you as a musician. So, what would you say is the most challenging thing about being a pagan musician?
uh, whew, Most challenging thing. Well, for me, um, a, cha- personal challenge for me is that I do not usually reach out to people to help with recording anything. I record everything myself on this desk, or at this desk. Like all of my second album was recorded here. My latest three singles were recorded at this desk, and you can see you can see my bed literally right behind me here. I don't have a lot of space to work with, so that's another challenge in and of itself. But that challenge aside, another one is kind of making sure to reach the right ears, right? Which is like I figured myself out as an artist. It's just a matter of amplifying the signal a bit to make sure that I reach the right people. And if there's anything that I've learned from the few concerts that I've gone to that are in this niche, being Ivor or Vardruna, I was able to virtually attend one of the High Lung concerts in Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado. Um, there's a demand for it, especially because like what we are doing in this niche is so different, right? So, for example, I just had a song come out on Friday called Cincy, which we'll be talking about in a little bit, where I had a handful of people reach out to me afterwards, and they're like, this is mind-blowing stuff because I don't know anyone else. I don't have anyone else in my life that makes music like this. So it's like plucking on the heartstrings a little bit, just be like, I'm glad it resonates with you, and because I mean, this is a very personal song to me and modeled after the first piece I ever wrote, which was from my grandfather. Um, we can talk about that again in a little bit, but that's the other big challenge is reaching the right ears, and a lot of that just has to come with meeting people in person. Also, if you want to send out ads for that type of thing via social media or whatever, knowing what to put and also have a little message attached to it that people can vibe with, and
Hmm.
understand, and maybe not adopt, but connect with, right?
Right. Well, and that kind of leads me to the next question. So, how can the IPMA help you manifest your personal musical reality?
Well, I mean, we're already kind of doing it right now, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
um, I mean, I've heard wonderful things about the IPMA. Person that kind of first told me about it was my friend Raven Rissy of Hemnetcheer. And the two of us met through her throat singing compatriot Jesse Tom. Um, and I've seen that the IPMA has connections to a number of different outlets for radio, but also for like magazines and whatnot. So, I mean, being helpful in those ways and kind of reaching the right eyes and ears in that way can be helpful. Um, Also, I would like to see if I can just chat with more people and make more friends, right? Because
Right.
anything, there's anything I've learned in recent years, because I should have mentioned earlier that nothing in my undergraduate or graduate studies taught me anything about music business,
Hmm.
which I believe was a shorthanded act on part of the university. And I think part of that was because perhaps the professors didn't really know what those things were. And so when the students are basically sent out in the world to try and figure it out, that's what we have to do, figure it out, because this business is constantly changing, right? Um, so anyway, that was a long-winded answer to your question, but
No, but
I
it's a
hope that
really good answer, and we hope that we can facilitate all of that for you. So, you've kind of given us little snippets, and now is the time. So, the song you chose is your newest one, Sinsic, and let's talk a bit about this before we listen to it.
right. So as mentioned before, I record, excuse me, everything from my home studio here. This one took a little over I want to say, hmm, it took a little under a year to fully record, because over the course of this last year and a half or so, since my second album came out, I was going to school, and I was also working as a music teacher. And then I even had to take on another side hustle as a cashier at a Whole Foods for that, to try and basically pay for schooling. And so recording had to be a little bit slow for it. But what this song is really about is processing the grief of a loved one, of losing a loved one, and exploring the peaks and valleys of that. So the first half of this song a is an instrumental where it's mostly a lead cello that is playing this kind of rich melody that like has a lot of open strings and kind of baroque aspects to it, and like parallel sixths and whatnot descending, um, but also very kind of that initial like shock and morose feeling of hearing that news, like, hey, your so and so friend or loved one passed away. It's kind of like exploring that and fleshing it out in, at least for me, a very kind of visceral way. And there are also some lyrics in it that narrate a story that's more or less chanted in like a very small choir. I think there are six voices involved, but the lyrics are in Norwegian, but they roughly translate to: broken and dead, cast into death sleep, a boy weeps in a cemetery. Reaching down to hell, he finds a song and casts it up with voice and strings. And after that's repeated a few times, another kind of whispered, sinister voice, acting as the voice of the underworld, or voices of the underworld, says, hell answered back, he lives in you still. So I've performed this piece a couple times live and will be again very soon. But one of the things I would do with that first chunk of the instrumental was I would invite, and I still invite people to invoke a memory of someone that they really cherish, and the memory of that person that brings them joy.
Hmm.
And what the listeners experience listening to this piece is what this song is about.
Yeah, I think that we can listen to it now, and then we can talk a bit to more after it when we're when we come back. So here we go. We're going to listen to Gremnir and Sinzik. So, welcome back, everybody. Wow, that song is just evokes so much when you listen to it. Um, I don't know, it kind of stands on its own, man. It's just like okay, let's just let it draw out and really feel it. I mean, it's a beautiful piece of music, and one of the
Thank
things
you.
I you're welcome. I mean, I know we talked about how it's a lot of it is about personal loss, and I just have a kind of curious question: is why did you choose Norwegian as the for the lyrics and not say English or any other language for that matter?
Right. So one of the reasons why I chose Norwegian was because when I found out a little bit about my heritage, it was specifically Norwegian.
Hmm.
So that's the big reason why I wanted to put that in here. Also because a lot of the folks in our niche of music, so to speak, a lot of them are not singing in English.
Hmm.
Most of them are coming from Northern Europe. And so it's like I feel like it would help lend some authenticity to the music if I put some of that language in it. So it's it felt right to me to do that.
Hmm.
So that's why. The English translation can actually be viewed on my Bandcamp page, so I can send that over if you wish.
Oh, well, awesome. Why don't you let our listeners know where that Bandcamp page is, as well as the disco page where they can download your song too.
Right. So if you want to try and listen to my song and purchase it, the link you can find or look up online is Gremnir, GREMNIR .bandcamp.com. You can
Awesome.
listen to and purchase it.
Awesome. Shortly, you'll also be able to go to ipaganma.org Gremnir, Gremnir, and on the bottom of his page will be a link, buy my music here, and just click on that link as well. So,
Mhm.
this is really awesome. Do you have a message that you want to share with those who will listen to this interview? Kind of to wrap us up here, sir.
A message. The only message I really have for anyone really is to share that we are living in a very dangerous time and to try and lead your life and try to leave I'm trying to lead my life with more kindness and compassion. I've ever since I was a kid, I've always been very sensitive, um, especially toward possibly interpreted malice or whatever. I was bullied a lot as a kid. Um, and I try to treat everyone I meet with a certain level of kindness and appreciation, compassion as well. And there's no shortage of things to be terrified of. Um, so the first part of my message is to try and lead with a little bit more compassion and kindness. And generally, as far as a message from my work, it's a message of that comes from a desire to understand myself better. And from that, I can try and understand others on that same level. It's kind of tying into compassion, I guess. Um, so the other part of my message is try not to be afraid to ask yourself difficult questions. What's the nature of what am I good at? What's the nature of my existence? How can I something I sometimes have to deal with is like I sometimes need to try and not judge people so harshly for saying something ignorant or whatever. There are plenty of reasons to lash out at people, especially on the internet where people love doing that, right?
Absolutely.
um, so if it elicits a negative response, acknowledge that negative response, but try not to let that consume us. That's what we call the id, pulling on your mind's strings there. Um, so anyway, lead with a little more compassion and kindness. Recognize the parts of yourself that are, or recognize the parts of ourselves that are causing us to perhaps act irrationally, and try to harness that for something a bit more productive than a reaction.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for that. Well, I really do appreciate you spending these few minutes with us and letting us dive deeper into who you are and what your music is. And I just want to say again, thank you for spending this time with me.
Thank you. This was a very nice conversation, and
Indeed,
I
I
hope
look.
there'll be
Yes,
many more.
yes, yes. I hope to repeat this conversation. Absolutely. So this is the IPMA's Who Am I interview series. I'm talking with Gremnir, and this is Alfred Wilhock, and we are saying to all of you to be more compassionate and be blessed in your life. Have a great night.